Hello there reason people, PoohBear here and welcome to my channel, and today we're going to be looking at CV, control voltage. This video is really more of a technical video and we're not going to be worrying too much about our sources and our destinations, and I'll do other videos in the future which will be sort of tackling that side of things. I will go over how CV does relate to MIDI devices, and obviously how we can get MIDI data in and convert it over into CV and all the rest of it. We'll have a look at obviously the different types of CV, because people do split up into different groups, which really is standard CV, and then we have our note and gate data, and then there's Poly CV as well. To be honest, they're all using exactly the same transport to get the information across. They're just, well, Poly CV is the only special one. To be perfectly honest, note, gate and CV, they're all the same thing, and you can really interchange these and mess around with them and have a lot of fun with them. So CV, we call it a control voltage, and we talk about volts. We're just talking about an amount, really. At the end of the day, you can just convert the volts and just think of as an amount. What we're going to be maybe changing some parameters on a device. It's an amount which will state which note are we hitting on the keyboard, and also how hard we've hit that note on the keyboard. And obviously we can also transfer other information as well via CV. So CV itself has a limit. It goes from minus 10,000 volts up to plus 10,000 volts. Now obviously we're all talking virtual here, so don't worry if you suddenly pumped 5,000 volts into the back of some tractor. It's not going to go bang or smoke or even glow. I mean, that could have been quite a nice little Easter egg they put in there. But anyway, so it has this lovely wide range, but to be perfectly honest, there's a tiny little bit in the middle which goes from -1 to +1. And for 99.9% of the time, this is the range that we really are interested in. And you could say, for a majority of the time, we're actually only interested between 0 and 1 volts. And the reason we're only interested in really between 0 and 1 volts, well, anything what comes from MIDI, that is what is going to be defined between, is them two values. Now, you might be thinking, well, between -1 and 1 is not exactly a lot of values, because it does go down several decimal places. And to be perfectly honest, most devices, when you start looking at, especially the tool tips, or there'll be an analyzer we'll be looking at later, they all go down to about 5 decimal places. Going down a lot further than 5 decimal places, it starts to become a bit impractical, especially if you're trying to control it with a knob or something. You'll have to turn it about 100 times just to get it to go up like 0.1 of a volt or something. So 5 decimal places is quite a good resolution for CV. Now, CV is a signal, and that's different from how MIDI works. It is a signal, and it's a continuous signal, and that's something which is quite important to understand. I refer to this as a back burner bit of information, so you can park this in the back of your head. If I wired loads of stuff up within reason, I can watch my DSP creep up and up and up, and I'm not even playing a single sound. I may not be passing what seems like any volts through, but I am. So even if I've got 0 volts going through, because this is in the digital world, we do have to pass a 0 down that wire, and that's hence why the DSP may look confusingly high, and you may think your system's not doing anything. Well, it is. It'll be passing all these zeros around. In the real world, in the analog world, and in the real world, look, I've got 0 apples in my hand. There is absolutely nothing there. But as I say, in a computer, it will have to store a 0 actually in the computer itself, and that's what gets passed around. So that even if there's 0, you have a device which will be constantly reading that piece of wire going, it's 0, it's 0, it's 0, it's 0, and depending on how it's optimized, because it might be optimized in a way to say, oh, if it's 0, I'm not going to do anything with it at all, or it just might still try and process whatever processing it has to do. And the same for a device which is sending something. It would just say, oh, it's just a 0, it's 0, and it just keeps sending out a 0. So they're chattering all the time. And that's different from sort of MIDI, because with MIDI, well, they do communicate, but at the end of the day, if we're just talking about note and gate stuff, if I'm not actually touching my keyboard, there's nothing going down the wires. But again, with CV, with note and gate data, if I hit, say I hit, it doesn't matter what key I hit, so say I hit that C there, we'll get a CV value, and that value will be sent down the wire. Now when I release the keyboard, in MIDI world, it'll actually send a release note out, and that's what it does. But in the CV world, well, actually that C or CV note data is still holding that C value. That C value doesn't drop down to 0. It will hold it indefinitely until it gets another value in, and then it will change it to whatever new note I play. What actually controls you hearing it, because you might be saying, oh, I can't hear it anymore, well, that's the gate data. So the gate data will be 0 volts. I hold a key down, it goes up to a voltage, and it will stay at that particular voltage, and the voltage will depend on your keyboard or what your input truly is. If it's obviously velocity sensitive keyboard, that value would vary between 0 and 1 depending on how hard you hit it. So if you hit it really hard, that'd be a full volt, and it'll hold it that full volt, and it'll keep holding it until I release my key, and then it'll drop it down. In the MIDI world, when I hit that key, it'll actually send a little bit of data out to say note on. And then when I release it, it will send out another bit of data to say note off. But in the CV world, as I say, it will just go to a particular voltage and hold it there indefinitely until you let go of that key, and then it'll drop it down. But the note data is still sending whatever the last value I hit on the actual keyboard. The other big difference is your standard note and gate data CV is monophonic. You can only push one value down at a time. Now we do have something called Poly CV, and Poly CV is acting more like how a MIDI keyboard works, and we'll actually have a look at the signal. We can't manipulate a Poly CV signal directly as we can manipulate any other kind of CV signals. If we do try and manipulate it directly, we'll end up just breaking it. It's that simple, because it's sending bursts of data packets down on a particular order, and another device will be reading them in a particular order and then acting on them. And that's how we get this, well, it does give us Poly CV effectively. That's how we're doing it. It is doing it serially, but it's going so fast, that's how we can perceive it. It's actually being Poly CV. So let's jump in and start having a look at what we've actually been talking about. One of the first things I'm going to load up is called the CVA. This is the Control Voltage Analyzer, and this is absolutely brilliant, obviously, for monitoring your CV signal and really for analysing your CV signal. If you're ever in doubt of what's going on, load this little RE up, and it's absolutely brilliant to see what's going on. I'm now going to load up myself a merge splitter. Now, the merge side of this here, this is a way we can actually add CV signals together, and you can also subtract. So if you've got a positive voltage and a minus voltage, you can put them into here and one will be taken away from the other. This is a splitter, and just to make sure to be clear, this will actually duplicate the signal. So it's not going to suddenly divide it by 3 or 4 because it happens to be 4 outputs. It's going to duplicate it, and this fourth one is actually going to invert it. So if you've got a +1 signal there, this would be a -1, and these other 3 would be +1. At the moment on the CVA, you notice we've got ... dots. So there's absolutely 0 signal coming into this. And I won't use the word 0, there isn't any signal coming into this at the moment, because obviously there's nothing wired up. So it doesn't matter if I take the merge or from the splitter, I'm going to put one cable in to start with into that CV, and straight away we've now got 0 volts. So this is that 0 I was talking about, which is being passed through the system. So at this very moment in time, there's a 0 going down this wire, and it's getting passed and passed and passed. So it's going back and forth. Well, it's not going back and forth, it's coming from the merge going into the CVA, and it's just continuously going. So that's just something I wanted to touch on. I'm now going to load up, this is called an Arcus. This is actually quite good. This is a paid device, by the way, this is free. The other device I use a lot is the CVA, sorry, the CV8X4. It's an 8-note knob generator. I'm only going to use this because I can go from minus to plus very, very quickly. So I'm just going to take the output from the Arcus, I'm just going to put it into the CV in here. And straight away, as I start to push up, you can see we're going to start going up in value. And this integer range goes from -127 to plus 127, and you can actually see it on the graph here. So there's my minus signal, that's my zero signal in the middle. So I'll roughly put it back to zero, there we are, that's a zero signal line, and there we go, that's the full. Now, this has three modes, which is integer, percentage and raw. I've never used the percentage mode, never ever. The raw mode is the mode I have it in most of the time, and this integer mode, if you're only dealing with positive values, like from 0 to +1, it's doubled up over here anyway, so you could leave this on raw and say, well, here's my raw value and here's my integer value. You can actually see it. However, when we go below 0, you can see this stays at 0. Here's my line coming down to -127, which is obviously -1 volt. And the other thing to bear in mind, as I say, if I was to pump 2 volts into this device, in fact, we can do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put from out of the Arcus into the merge, and I could take another one from the Arcus and just use one knob, but I'm actually going to use 2 knobs just for demonstration purposes and put it into the merge, and I'm going to take the merge and put it into the CVA. So now very quickly, obviously, if I push this up, oops, there's my 1 volt. I'm now going to push this one up to 1 volt. So here's our 2 volts. Here's my integer value of 127, and obviously if I'm on the integer mode here, it's still saying it's 127. So this knob here, even though you can sort of see so I went into the minus then. So if I kept it in the plus, it's not going to ever register. So as soon as I go down below, so this is now a minus, so this is +1 minus 1 will equal 0. So it's that simple. That's how we can do simple addition and subtraction. Let's actually quickly jump in and have a look at note and gate data. So what I'm actually just going to do is just change my screen slightly. I'm going to take the Hamu. There's a number of devices which will convert MIDI into CV. One of the things I like about the Hamu, which I pointed out in my previous video, is it has a poly mode as well as what we refer to as the normal note and gate data mode. And we'll actually have a look at both modes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to duplicate the CVA7. In fact, I've just duplicated absolutely everything because it's got a wire in it, isn't it? So let me just get rid of some of this other stuff. And Control-Shift-G, let's take that off. So what I'm going to do, oops, I'm just going to scroll this back over. So you can see exactly what I'm going to take the note data and put it into the top one so we can have a look at the notes. And then I'm going to take the gate data and put the gate in the bottom one. And if I just zoom in, we'd better see things a lot easier. And I should be able to just drag this keyboard down here. So, as I said, the bottom one's the gate. So when I hold down the key, we can see this is my gate information. So it's going up, it's going to stay up. And if you notice, this is my note, which is obviously G2, which I'm pressing at the moment. But when I release, my gate's gone down to 0, but my key will stay the same. And that will stay the same until I change it. So there we go, I've changed it. So let's do, so gate on, gate off. So you can see that going. As I say, that doesn't change unless we physically change the key. Now this is obviously something you could use to your advantage because there's nothing stopping you of actually taking this note information and use it to go into any CV input on the back of a device. One possibility you might want to use this data for could be to open up a filter or something. So the higher up the keyboard you go, you might want to open up the filter more, or vice versa. You can put it into an invert, so you close the filter off more as you go higher up the keyboard and open it up more when you go down lower. There's all kinds of things you can do with these. And we refer to this as gate data. The other sort of data, we refer to this as a trigger. So the actual line going up, we will refer to as a trigger, and something like that, this, you know, you'd pump into something like a Kong or something, or a redrum. That's the sort of device you can trigger using this sort of thing. So let's actually have a quick look at Poly CV and how that differs. So I'm just going to put the gate and the note into their appropriate places, and then we're going to swizz around, and straight away you can see this thing sort of burbling away. There's something going on here, and when I hold a key down, it's going to be quite quick. There we go, see that note go? Let me take this zoom down, so I think we should be able to see it a lot slower. Oh, it's made it too small. or is it the scale? No, the scale's not going to work. So so as soon as I hit a key, you can see it going across. When I take my finger off, then it releases it. So it's on, off. And obviously this is totally different from how the normal CV works. So this is where I'm saying is we can't really manipulate this data in real time. It's going too fast. But if I had a Poly CV signal going through and I really wanted to manipulate it, well, you can do. There's a, I don't know if I've actually got it here. There's a free device, again by Blamsoft, and let's have a quick look for that. And that's called a breakout box. Here we go. And all you're going to do really is we're going to take our Poly stuff, and it doesn't matter really which order you put these in. Yes, it does actually. I lied there. That's big time. Gating note into the appropriate one. And now this, in fact, I've just done it the wrong way around, haven't I? Is now acting like normal CV. So I've got my note on the bottom this time. So you can see as I change my note, it's changing. And that's how we can now manipulate a Poly signal. After I finish manipulating it, there's nothing stopping me taking it and pumping it back in again. And whoops, it'd be that one there, wouldn't it? And now I'm back off on my Poly mode, and I can go into a Poly instrument or another device. So I can break it out, manipulate it, and put it back in again. So it's quite a powerful little device, this breakout box. But I won't go into too much detail about that. I do actually use it in some of my modules, so in the future videos you're actually going to see me using that. So let's just get everything cleared up, so we're back to the beginning again. What I'm quickly going to demonstrate now is, as I said to you, it doesn't, CV, note and gate data, I said they're all interchangeable. We can mix them up, and that's exactly what we're going to do right now. I'm just going to take myself a simple LFO. I'm going to put this onto a square. There we go. I'm going to take that input out, and we can actually view this actually running. So there we go. We've got ourselves a square. One of the reasons I'm going to use little LFO over something like a pulsar is we've got a pulse width, and the pulse width we can obviously change the width of the square itself, so we can make it longer and shorter, and that's something I actually want for this particular demonstration. And then in the second one, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take a random waveform. And for the moment I'll put it onto the same tempo setting, and I'm going to put that into a gate in, and then what I'm going to do is just wire it up to a synth. So I can take this out, I can put that into the gate, and already we can start to hear some sound. And then I'm going to take some notes and put the note in. Now all of a sudden it's all gone deep, and the reason it's gone deep is because we need to take this signal and push it up. Now on the back, as you can see, we've got some different settings, and I'm going to take this and put it into a unipolar setting and turn that on actually. And by changing the amp on this particular one, we're tightening the range of the notes. So very simply, we're now using an LFO to drive the combinator. Now with CV, the only way to shut it up, either we need to put an AB switch in so we can just take that gate out and we can make it quiet. And that's the only way you're going to be able to quieten it down. Just in case you're wondering, well, these notes are actually around the middle going above and up and down, but as I said, we've actually changed it to unipolar. What we can do here is actually we can take ourselves another CVA, and this time I'm just going to put this as a pass-through, and I'm going to take the out and put it into this in, and you're actually seeing now the result we're pumping into this. And as you can see, there's a 0 line, that's on the 0 line, and we've now pushed it into, say, this is a unipolar, so it's going from 0 to 1 now. And if I increase the amplitude right up, you can see we'll be actually using the whole of that 0, and that'll be getting some real deep notes. So as I say, it's just something that, just as a pure demonstration, that we can take pure CV stuff and we can pump it across and use it as note and gate data. And we can, as I said, just as well take note and gate data and push it into the back of instruments and control any of the parameters, you know, any of these CV ins, we can control using gate and note data as well. So it's totally interchangeable. All right, I'm going to stop the video here now because there's going to be, well, I could talk about CV for hours and hours and hours, and I'm going to do many more videos about different bits to do with the CV. Something which particularly I'm going to be looking at will be something to do with scaling and offset and CV lag, and effectively that's what we've got going on here. So by taking a bipolar signal, turn it into a unipolar signal, we are actually scaling it down and then we're offsetting it. And then we've got something called CV lag and all sorts of other things. So I'll have a look at them because they actually come in very handy for when you're doing CV stuff. All these bits which we'll be looking at, we're going to be expanding. So in the first video, we built our little monophonic modular synthesizer. This is a 8-voice synthesizer, and we're actually going to be looking at how we can build this up as well. And as you can see, there's a lot more going on in this particular synthesizer than our basic one which we built. Everything what's going on in here is actually very, very straightforward. We've got a few kinds of special little things going on here as well, which I'm going to go through. Sample and hold is something I haven't touched on, which is really, really useful again for CV. And yet we're going to go through how we can actually get more wave shapes out of our basic 4 shapes. Yeah, so there'll be all the future videos which will be coming up. And all I can say now is thank you for watching, and bye for now.